Hi friends, it's Unicorn and today I want to make a video about all the interesting books I found about Saudi Arabia when I was doing my research for the From and About Asia reading project. As usual, all the information about the project and also these books will be linked down below, especially the blog post where you can find information about some actual books. And don't forget to join the Discord server if you haven't. And this will be the first of two videos about Saudi Arabia that I'm gonna make for the project. And same with the Lebanon month, I didn't and don't plan to read all of the books in this video due to the limited time I have, so most of the information are gathered during research. There are three types of books here. The first one is fiction, the second one is generally about the women's rights in Saudi Arabia. Normally they will be all categorized as non-fiction, but there are a bunch of them, so I think they can be their own category. And the third one is non-fiction about other topics. So now, without further ado, let's get started. The first novel here is called The Girls of Riyadh by Raja Al-Sani, translated by Martin Booth. This is one of the most popular books in Saudi Arabia. It has been translated into more than 20 languages. And if I remember correctly, this book was actually originally banned in Saudi Arabia. This is a story about four young Saudi Arabia women who likes traveling and were able to travel across the globe. Therefore, they're facing the colliding between the restrictive traditions they have and the culture from a wider world. This book is written in the format of email exchanges and lead us into the world of Saudi young women and see how they're searching for love and fulfillment and also balancing their beliefs and the things that they see in our outer world. And then there's a book called The Others by Siba Al-Hirs. This is a book centered around a teenage nameless girl and talking about how she came to terms with her sexuality and discovered the world of lesbian parties, online flirtation, and also hotel liaison. And of course, we're following the conflict between the throat discovery and also the shame that come at her because of the society and her education. One interesting thing about this book is that the author is actually using a pen name when publishing, and the translator didn't want to reveal their name either. Following is a novel called Hindan and the Soldiers by Bajuel Albathir and translated by Sina Dahir. The protagonist of the story is a woman who just went through a failed arranged marriage with an army officer, and she decided to establish herself as a writer and make choices for herself. Effort was strongly blocked by her mother, who is a firm believer of traditional values, but at the same time, she also came to realize the suffer that the older generation in her family went through, especially all the women and their experiences. But she also came to see how the traditional values limited and affected the men in her family. It says that this novel didn't shy away from some topics like sexuality and religions, and it's quite insightful. Then there's a thriller called Finding Noof by Zoe Farelas. This is the first book of a trilogy, and it's talking about a teenage 16-year-old girl called Noof went missing in the desert, and her parents hired a desert guide to looking for her. And 10 days later, they found the body of Noof in the desert, but she wasn't died from dehydration, but from drowning. But her family was very suspiciously uninterested to the truth behind her death. And I think it's very intriguing, the setting, and the more I think about it, the more I want to read it. And it's really rare to find some translated genre fictions for our reading project, so I'm very excited for this book. Speaking of genre fiction, there's a middle grade novel here, although I don't think middle grade is technically a genre, but it's called The Green Bicycle by Helfi and Manser. This book is talking about a 11-year-old girl who desperately wanted a bicycle so that she can race her friend. It's considered very inappropriate for girls to ride bikes in Saudi Arabia, but she is determined to make money in her own way and won't stop until she got her bicycle. This book sounds so adorable, and it's almost like a mini version of how adult women's life in Saudi Arabia. Then I have a couple of books about women's rights and women's experiences in Saudi Arabia. The first one is called In the Land of Invisible Women by Quanta A. Ahmed. This is a memoir about a British Muslim doctor who practiced in the US, but she got denied a visa to stay in the US, so she took on a job for 2 years to a hospital in Saudi Arabia. This is one of the books I plan to read for for Saudi Arabia, and I've already finished it. I liked how we learned the culture of Saudi Arabia at the same time with the author because she's also a newcomer to the kingdom. And we got a detailed look of how the women's life are like in Saudi Arabia with all the restrictions. And even though the author is a Muslim herself, and she even thought that she'll feel the sense of belonging and also some similarities to the culture before she landed to Saudi Arabia, it's still quite a culture shock to her. So in general, I really like this book and I think I learned a lot from it, but the book also has flaws. More of that in the upcoming Saudi Arabia wrap-up video. Then there's a book called A Society of Young Women, Opportunities of Place, Power, and Reform by Amelia La Reynard and translated by Kate Ross. This is another book in my Saudi Arabia TBR, but unfortunately I haven't get to it yet. This is a book about how young women are slowly but surely changed the structure of the society in Saudi Arabia, including places like workplace, academia settings, and places of consumerism. I actually grew more interest of this book after I read In the Land of Invisible Women, because in that book, Kwangta talks about how when she was in Saudi Arabia, it was actually the young women who's helping her and formed a very tight community with each other. But at the same time, they also compete with each other quite excessively because of the patriarchy system. So I want to know how exactly a society of young women works and also learn more about their connection. Following, there's a book called A Most Masculine State, Gender Politics and Religion in Saudi Arabia by Medawi al-Rashid. This is a book written based on state document, media sources, and interviews about women all across Saudi Arabia. It examines the intersection between gender, religion, and politics in this highly patriarchy society. Another interesting book is called Daring to Drive, A Saudi Women's Awakening by Mena El-Sharif. This is a memoir of the author, who is a daughter of a taxi driver, and she also studied computer security engineer and works in a desert compound. But she was awfully attacked by her behavior, for example, how she talks to her male colleagues. And she also has a car, but she keeps it in the garage because women are not allowed to have a driver's license back in the days. It was until 2018 that women are first issued lessons to drive, so the ability to drive is a very important topic in the feminism activity in Saudi Arabia. So I was immediately drawn to the title. Another memoir here is by the wife of an imprisoned activist called Read Baidari, A Voice for Freedom, My Husband, Our Story. It's written by Insaf Hidar, translated by Andrea C. Hoffman. This couple is married in 2002 after a long fight against all the resistance against their marriage due to the Saudi culture. And after they got married, Read Baidari started to get more and more active in the liberal movement in Saudi Arabia, and eventually he was arrested and sent to prison for 10 years. And after his arrestment, his wife Insaf Hidar started her own battle about the freedom of her husband and recount their story in this book. The last book in this topic is called Princess, A True Story of Life Behind the Veil in Saudi Arabia by Jin Session. This book is about a princess called Sultana who was born to the royal family in Saudi Arabia, and she seemingly has everything, but she felt like she was living in a gilded cage and decided to speak out for the women in the family. This is a very peculiar book because the book said in order to protect the safety of Sultana, her real name is actually not revealed in the book. So that makes a lot of readers wonder if the stories of her are true or purely fictional. But based on the reviews that I read, a lot of the elements in the story are actually pretty accurate. So I don't have a conclusion about this book, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, but I think it's a very interesting point of view to read about the women's rights in Saudi Arabia. I have 4 other non-fictions about other culture aspect of Saudi Arabia. The first one is from a series called Culture Smart. It's called Saudi Arabia Culture Smart, The Essential Guide to Costume Cultures by Nicholas Buchele or Nicholas Buckley. I don't know which to pronounce. This series of books provide us essential information on attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors in different cultures, and it's the same of Saudi Arabia. It teaches us what to expect and how to behave. I feel like this can be a very informative and also a relaxing books to read because it only teaches the general culture aspect of Saudi Arabia and doesn't necessarily discuss a lot about the deeper reasons behind all the different elements, and it will be very useful if we one day want to travel to Saudi Arabia. Then there's Inside the Kingdom by Robert Lindsay. This is a 180 turn from the last book, and it talks about the modern history of Saudi Arabia based on the experiences of the culture when he was lived in Saudi Arabia. It talks about how the oil boom redefined the country and the struggles it has, and also the balancing between the traditional values and also the rapidly demand from other countries in the world. This is another book that in my personal Saudi Arabia TBR, and I'm just in the middle of it. Second to the last book of this video is about a group of very interesting young people called Joyriding in Riyadh by Pasar Nord. This is a book centered around a group of young people who go on joyriding and skate kart every night in the avenue of Riyadh. This book talks about the social fabric of Saudi Arabia and also discuss the impact of oil industry on things like public spaces, the economy, and the culture. This book is also about social violence and the politicization of youth culture and the economic inequality. The last book is about international relations and politics. It's called The American's Kingdom: Myth-Making of the Saudi Oil Frontier by Robert Vitalis. From the title, we can tell it's about the Americans' influence of Saudi Arabia based on the special relationship between the two countries. The book dated back to the 1930s when America established a Jim Crow system in Saudi's oil campus until later on when the workers started to challenge the hierarchy system. It covers more than 70 years of stories on the Saudi oil field under the impact of the United States. And that's all the books I want to cover in this video. Again, you can check out more information about these books and also more books in the blog post that I linked down below. And don't forget to join the Discord server if you are interested in this reading project. I hope you find this video interesting and hopefully you picked up one book or two about Saudi Arabia that you want to read. And please let me know any of your thoughts about these books or this video, and don't forget to say hi in the comment section down below. I wish you happy reading, stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll see you in my next Bookish video. Bye!